I'm Wendy K Laidlaw.
And I am the Emotionologist. What makes us who we are? Why do some emotions liberate us while others seem to chain us down? This podcast is about getting to the heart of the matter, uncovering the truths beneath our emotions. What are their meanings? Over the years, I've discovered that when emotions are blocked, they don't just weigh on our hearts. They can actually weigh heavily in the body and show up as sickness, pain, and/or conditions and diseases that demand our attention for change. Through stories, science, and soulful conversations, we'll explore how to dissolve those shackles and release and unleash your inner Picasso so that you can create a more authentic, vibrant, and free life. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, as always, I do hope that this podcast and video message finds you well. Now today I am so super excited to have our next guest on. He is Dr. Joseph Jebelli, who has written this book, wonderful book called The Brain at Rest. He goes into a lot of detail about, what is it that makes how do we get the best from our brain? He is a neuroscientist, a writer, and one of the most accessible voices in explaining the complexities of the human brain. Dr. Jebelli studied and taught at University College in London. His research and writing focus on how the brain works and how it changes over time, and most importantly, how we can look after our brain and get the best from it. He has a gift for taking dense neuroscience and turning it into easy, enjoyable stories and insights that resonate with everyday life. His latest book, The Brain at Rest, that I've just shared with you, is a fascinating exploration of why rest isn't a luxury. It is a necessity, and a biological necessity at that. Drawing from cutting-edge science, Dr. Jebelli shows us how to use downtime and how it activates what they call the brain's default network, the space where creativity sparks, memories settle, emotions are processed, and resilience is built. As you know, as an emotionologist, it's very important to allow time for ourselves in this busy world to listen and hear and tune into our emotions all the time. He makes the case that true rest is about more than just sleep. Obviously, we need to have good sleep, but what is it and how is it that we interact with our bodies and ourselves during the day? And it's about the small rituals, the pauses that allow the brain and the body to reset and, of course, heal itself. From quiet walks in nature to the power of daydreaming and mind wandering, just to simply sitting in silence for small little bite-sized pieces of time. The Brain at Rest reminds us that productivity and health are not born with constant busyness. And I know that's so hard in this day and age because we've got this sense of we should always be doing, and if we're not doing, then there's something wrong with us. But our bodies and our brains need space, creating space so that they can be restored. It's a timely message in a world that often glorifies overwork. There's some really frightening statistics nowadays of how overwork is increasing the sickness and indeed passing away of many people because people are just pushing themselves far too far. And one that shows rest as not only vital for mental clarity and emotional balance, but also for the strength of our immune system and overall well-being. And of course, our immune system obviously helps fight off any viruses and bacterias and diseases and all sorts of different things. So we need a healthy immune system at all costs. So I'm excited to be sharing my time with Dr. Joseph Jebelli. As a wee side note, I saw this book recently at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and I was so thankful to pick it up and read it. And I went immediately and bought it, and I pretty much read it over like 4 or 5 days at night. As you know, I like to read before I go to sleep. And I say it came at, I really welcomed it. It came at a great time because, like with everybody else, we're constantly fed this message consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, that if we're not busy and active and doing and accomplishing all the time, then there's something wrong with us and that we're not enough. So it was a welcome reminder just to always come back to the basics. As you know, that I'm a huge advocate of journaling first thing in the morning, having your power shake, and having a rest or relaxation or a nap in the afternoon. You actually get more from yourself and your body. Your body, if you're feeling a little bit worn down or tired, it can just be like um the sort of electric shock that it needs, that charge that we can't use our phone when our batteries are dead. And the same goes for ourselves, and especially our brain. Our brain is a energy hungry organ that needs a lot of kind of rest and distraction and play and being out in nature to get even more from it. And that is the oxymoron here. So I really hope you enjoy this video. It's such a joy to interview Joe. I think we probably could have spoken a little bit longer, but enjoy. You'll find details on how his book is available in all major stores online and on the high street. Get out, buy it. It's awesome. It'll change your life for the better. And yeah, hope to catch up again soon. Enjoy the show. Hey, Joseph.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm very well. So lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for your interest.
Yeah, absolutely loved your book. I think I mentioned in my email that I'm on my second read.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah, no, that's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I have to say, it came along at the perfect time for me. I was at a book festival recently, international Edinburgh International Book Festival, and I saw it on the display, and I thought, you know what, it was just what I needed at this point in my life to be reminded how important the brain
Hmm.
was. So I kind of gobbled it up, when you find something, you're like, you're speaking. I needed to hear and read this right now.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's so good to hear. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to achieve with it. So, yeah, that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Yes, I think you start the book so eloquently talking about how in Iran or Tehran, they let me get this right, that work is a crown, uh,
Hmm.
and rest is wisdom. And I thought just that was just so true, isn't it? But in the West, we've just completely forgot about rest and the wisdom that lies in there. So I guess
Hmm.
it's kind of what led you. Was there, I know obviously you mentioned your mom and your dad as well, but was there an overwhelming thing that kind of led you, like called you to do that, to write a book?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I would say so. It was sort of a combination of things, really. So there was the personal element for me,
Yeah.
seeing my father and my mother, whose work, my mother's work ethic is actually even more extreme than my father's.
Yeah.
Seeing them both work to such extremes
Uh-huh.
and becoming incredibly overworked and burnt out, and to the point of actually suffering like really bad mental health disorders. Like I say in the book, my dad suffers major depressive disorder now. My
Mm.
mum's, her blood pressure is so high now that the GP contacts her almost daily to ask for blood pressure readings. I mean, she's at a level now that is called a hypertensive emergency. That, I mean, it's really quite worrying, and she won't
Yeah.
slow down because she's still very much inculcated in that old-fashioned work
Uh-huh.
ethic of just hunker down and get on with it and just work
Yeah.
harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
So seeing like their health deteriorates as a result of overwork and burnout had a big impact on me. And then I, as I say in the book as well, I experienced it myself.
Yeah.
Insofar as when I was a research scientist at the University of Washington, I was overworking, and I didn't even really realize it at the time, because again,
Yeah.
I was stuck in that mindset, that outmoded idea of the harder that you work, the more you're going to achieve, and the better you're going to be in every respect. So
Yeah.
I was, in the lab all day, and then I would, doing experiments with students, doing, working really hard, and then I would leave the lab and I would go straight to a nearby coffee shop and sit and work on either grants or my first book until like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I
Yeah.
did that for quite a long time. And I think I just thought, well, this is fine, this is normal, and I can handle this. And I think, to some extent that's true. I mean, I was a bit younger than I am now, but I was still just absolutely knackered, and my
Uh-huh.
health was deteriorating. My sleep was quite bad. I didn't really feel, I felt foggy and not very creative. And I just thought, well, okay, I'm pushing myself too hard. And so I started to ease off a bit.
Yeah.
And the really incredible thing is once I started to ease off, actually that's when everything got better, not just but for my health, but for my work, the quality of my work and my ability to work harder. And
Yeah.
so that in combination with the family history made me think, okay, what do we actually know about the resting brain? What is our brain doing when we rest? And as soon as I started to look into that neuroscience, what I found was really extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. And that must have been quite you know, I mean, it must have been very hard for you watching your parents, and then we're all the same. I come from two generations of family business where you, as soon as you were able to walk and talk, you were in the family business and you were
Mm.
working like, 7 days and working like 15-hour days, and work was the culture. It was the air that you breathed. It
Mm.
must have been very challenging for you to kind of grow into that, and then suddenly, but how amazing that you had that awareness. Was there I appreciate, obviously, you realized that your health was suffering, things were happening, but for you to have that kind of awareness is really sharp. Was there a specific catalyst? Was there a wake up where you kind of, one day going, I can't do this anymore, or was it your body screaming, or
Well, it's interesting because so neuroscientists have known for a not that long. I mean, about the so basically for so the default network, like the resting brain network, the thing that becomes active when you essentially when you do nothing, when you disengage from a task, when you rest. That was discovered in 2001,
yeah,
but by a really really extraordinary neurologist called Marcus Raichle, who I interviewed in the book. But it's only in the last few years that neuroscientists have really begun to flesh out the default network and actually really understand what it is and what our brains are doing when we rest. And
yeah,
so I was very much because I was, because I'm a neuroscientist and I was working in a laboratory, we were, me and the other scientists, we were all aware of the default
I'm
network.
all immersed in it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. We always, we'd heard about it, we'd read about it, and we were, we all thought it was interesting, you know. But I think at the time there was still that culture of, okay, this is interesting, but lots of neuroscientists, well, no, I wouldn't say lots, but there was still a kind of idea that it was something in the background, that it was
Yeah,
background noise, or it was background something that people, I think, to be honest, neuroscience scientists just weren't that interested in at the time, because they
yeah.
were very much in this
Well, if you
they,
think of the executive network, it's all about output, isn't it? It's about getting as much
exactly,
as you can. So I can see
yeah,
why money and focus wouldn't be on the default network, which, as you say, is a resting brain,
yeah.
which gives us, we get more output from the default network, which is counterintuitive. So I can almost see why there wouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was, people, it was really interesting at the time, for many, many years, for decades even, scientists would put people in brain scanners, perform an fMRI to see, okay, can we pinpoint where in the brain precise functions are located? So you'd put someone in a scanner and you would say, name as many letters as you can beginning with the letter K, or let's perform some memory tasks. And they would look for what lights up
Yeah,
in the brain, because they were so interested in what the brain was doing when we work, when we perform a task.
yeah.
And they actually had to delete the default network signal when the participants were just resting in the scanner before they actually performed the task. So they would just be
Wow.
there resting and relaxing, and there would be this screaming background signal, this default network signal. And but in order to actually pinpoint, the task related networks, they would have to delete that signal. And then it was only until recently that the scientists said, actually, hang on, let's look at this network. And now so much data, as I say, shows that no matter, it doesn't matter if you're a student, a doctor, a train driver, whatever task you're performing, you will perform better if you rest beforehand,
Yeah,
precisely because you're activating your default network. And so what this new science is basically teaching us is that we have our understanding of work and rest completely upside down.
completely. Yeah,
It's rest that is the driver of sustained productivity, not work. And
absolutely.
rest has now been shown to improve, your intelligence, creativity, memory, problem solving abilities, emotional processing, and so much more.
Yeah.
and it can even lower your chances of developing things like depression and dementia. And so what I'm really trying to do with the book is to explain that science to people and to try and show people that we need to spend much more time resting than working, and that's actually how we're going to produce our best work and also lead to long-term sustained productivity.
Yeah. And I think that's it. It's like trying to turn a cultural tankard, oil tankard around in the sea. I mean, it's like trying to get that energy of, or first, getting the neuroscientists to go, oh, actually, there's something here. Even the fact you're saying they had to turn the default network or the data off on that it says a lot. I know on my own journey from I was very ill to being well was I discovered even just the afternoon 15 minutes to half an hour meditation relaxation, and then suddenly I would what I used to call get these insights, downloads, whatever, of
Mm.
problems or challenges, and they come pouring in. So it was lovely to read that in your book about this whole, trying to filter, as you say, we've got everything upside down, and this guilt culture of if you are resting, then you're bad or you're lazy or you should be doing more and you should be producing more output. But actually, and I guess if you think of certain cultures like like in Iran and like in Spain and places like that, they have their afternoon siestas. I mean, that's like
Mm.
part of the culture. I think there was a study done in Greece of they stopped doing the afternoon siestas there, and heart rate issues increased quite substantially
Oh,
over
really?
period.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so there's all this data and information and science
Mm.
behind it, and I'm assuming as you're speaking to lots of people, it's wonderful because like myself, I'm like, oh, I have. You see, the sign says I need to rest. It's like you're looking for that kind of that green light, that tick in the box that actually not only my body but my brain and my immune system, everything, my emotional health, everybody and everything needs this to produce
Mm.
more, because that's the conundrum. People think, well, I better not, because normally when we work with women, it's like you take an afternoon nap, take 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever, and you just go and sit on the grass, or you lie down and whatever. And the difference that that makes to the body is profound. But those round about kind of go, oh, what are you doing taking all that time and everything? So how
Mm.
have you found people perceive this kind of concept of the default network, executive network, but the brain at rest and filtering in that? Has there been quite a lot of resistance to
Mm.
this?
There's definitely been some. So when so some people I would tell them, okay, I'm writing a book about the neuroscience of rest and the importance of spending time doing literally nothing.
Yes.
And some people would sort of shrug and be like, oh, that sounds nice. That sounds nice, if only sort of thing. People would still think of it, as you would expect, as a kind of a luxury and indulgence, something that's kind of like unprincipled and maybe even irresponsible.
Yeah, yeah,
And and many people do still think of rest in that way, and that's a cultural problem, but also just a lack of scientific understanding problem. The cultural
yeah,
problem, I mean, you can take that back all the way to the 16th century Protestant work ethic of just keep calm and
completely.
carry on.
Yeah, yeah,
Um and then but then I think that, in combination with a lack of scientific understanding of the brain, has
yeah,
been the real driver towards that mentality. Because people, what I found when speaking to so many different people, is that people, they think of the brain, uh, and again, this is I put the blame on this on neuroscientists as well, because I think for a long time neuroscientists did use the metaphor, and as many still do, of a muscle. They think of it like a muscle, like, okay, so when I'm working, my brain is basically working out. It's at the gym, it's doing all these things. And then when I go off and I just spend time walking through a park or sitting on a beach or having a nap, it's powering down
yeah,
in the way that a muscle would when I'm not lifting weights.
yeah,
And the complete opposite is true. It's becoming much more active when you
yeah,
when you go and rest. The default network occupies 20% of the brain, whereas the executive network, the work network, the network we use when there's like a task to be done, actually only
yeah.
occupies about 5 to 10%.
Wow.
So that's I think that's why there's been some resistance to it. But then when you explain when you explain the science to people and you say, there's this thing called the default network. It's basically your resting brain, and when it becomes active, your cognitive abilities improve, and you're much better able to solve problems and be more productive in the long run. And then you talk about all the different studies, and then people do think, okay, this is really interesting. But the thing is, it's like you were just saying a minute ago. Um, that people intuitively know it's correct because,
Yeah.
as you were
Yeah.
saying, when people, you were saying that you spend some time away,
Mm.
and suddenly the idea pops into your head. So
Yeah.
psychologists have
Every
known that.
time.
Yeah,
Every time.
exactly.
And I
Yeah, and
literally have to push myself away, close my laptop, and walk away. And because I can feel the friction, like when I know I need
mm,
to do it. But the resistance is real. Like it's hard.
yeah, that's the resistance is. I mean, I talk a little bit about productivity guilt in the book. This
Yes,
idea that we equate our value as human beings with our economic outputs, and that,
completely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's really pervasive.
Where
And
it's
it,
like badges of honor on,
yeah,
stripes on our arm and badges on our front.
yeah, exactly. And
I was writing in my journal this morning. Sorry for interrupting. I was
no, no,
writing in
no.
my journal this morning, kind of, before you're preparing to chat to you. And I was like, gosh, I remember the time, even just like, beginning of COVID. And I wore this badge of honor that I'd worked through the night. And I did two ultimate emotional health summits and interviewed like 40 odd people. And I did this and I did that and I did that. And I was
Mm,
completely burnt out, but it was like,
mm,
oh, I could show up in the world because I'd done this and I'd done this. And you get to the point, well, when is enough enough? And what are you doing it for? So
mm,
you're always
mm,
kind of like pushing. But it's interesting what you were saying about the brain
mm,
being active. And I wonder, um, and solutions to the problems in the default network when it's at rest is, I think that where there's been a more, and I'll talk about myself, is when you rest and then stuff comes up. That's when you feel the conflict even more of perhaps
mm,
areas of your life or things that are relationships, things that are happening that aren't right for you, don't work for you. There's a challenge for you. There's something out of sync. And of course, when your brain gets time to think, that's when all these thoughts come up. And I think now people just numb themselves out because they don't take enough rest to get
mm,
they get floods of information, and then people numb
mm.
themselves out through all these addictive behaviors, which work is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think people numb themselves in so many different ways, especially with smartphones and
Yeah,
screen
but
time.
numbing the mind. It's like numbing the brain
Yeah.
from even allowing themselves to even trust that they don't have to act straight away on whatever information comes to them, but actually it will provide the solution that's right for you. But it's almost creating, there needs to be more of us kind of like, it's okay to rest and it's okay.
Mm,
Journaling and meditation and taking time allows you that contemplation and that creativity, if you like, to kind of look at life from an observer perspective rather than be sucked into the vacuum conveyor belt that we have of the corporate mentality.
yeah, no, absolutely. Those are such good points. So they've got me thinking about so many different things. So I mean, I suppose the first thing to say about that is that there's a really famous study, one of my favorites actually, that where they took a group of students and they said that, and they put them in a room and they said, we're going to leave you in this room for, I think it was about half an hour or so,
Yeah.
and you're just allowed to just think. So you're not allowed your smartphones, you're not allowed any distractions, any like games or anything. We just
Yeah.
want you to sit and think.
Yeah.
And they asked them before the experiment, how do you think this is going to go? Are you excited about it? Do you think it's going to be fun? And
Yeah.
obviously, they all said, well, no, this is not going to be fun at all. We're not looking forward to it. It's going to be really boring.
Yeah.
But then when they came out of the experiment, they were all really shocked at how edifying and enlightening and thrilling just being allowed to just think was.
Yeah.
And that's because we are on our phones so much now,
I
which
know.
which we do because it does. I say in the book, it feels like rest because it's a distraction from what you were just doing, but it just
Uh-huh.
masquerades as rest.
Yeah.
And because what screens and digital content and many of the distractions in our modern world do, is they
Yeah.
train your distraction. They don't train your resting brain. They don't
Yeah.
lead to default network resting brain activity, which means they don't lead to self-generated thought. And that's what these students were having in that experiment, where they were just thinking. They were for the first time, almost like coming up for air after being
Yeah.
underwater for so long. They were having self-generated thought. They were letting their minds wander, and they were loving it. They were thinking, this is really thrilling. Um,
I love that you say that they came out feeling lighter and enlightened, because I in Edinburgh, I live, in a place where there's lots of students and I love their energy, but they're just constantly like on their phones.
mm,
And I have this saying that the secret to life is balance, and the secret to balance is awareness, and the secret to awareness is journaling and meditation. Because I have seen people totally transform their lives and their bodies just by that kind of process.
mm,
Exactly what you're saying with that study. If you just take away what is the distractions, and again, the culture is based around that, because if you don't feel very confident within yourself, then you're seeking outward to get validation and like be told by some complete stranger what you should be thinking and feeling, which then feeds the cycle of insecurity and
mm.
whatever. And you don't, because everything that we need is within us. That's the irony, isn't it? But
Yeah,
our
yeah.
culture doesn't encourage that. Just I mean, I've watched people totally transform, and it's so beautiful when you go, well, what are your instincts telling you? What is your gut telling you? And if they don't know, well, just trust that it'll come to you when you're ready to receive it. But if from what you were saying in your book, like even, which I have to talk about, which I just loved so much. There's so many things I loved about your book, but the forest bathing, I just thought was insane, because it increased white blood cell count by 40%.
Yeah, that was these
It was
fight
insane.
phytoncide exposure. So
Yeah,
when you're in a green, you don't even necessarily need to be in a forest, just a green space.
yeah,
Plants release chemicals called phytoncides, which are they're essentially just natural oils that protect plants and trees from bacteria. But we
yeah.
now know that we breathe those in, and they have an amazing effect on our immune system. As you
That
said,
so excites me. I can't tell you. It's like
it's
insane.
it goes up. So they did. I mean, it was really interesting. They did a study in Japan where they took basically a group of businessmen from Tokyo, and they went camping for 3 days,
Yeah.
and the phytoncide exposure led to a 40% increase in their
Yeah.
natural killer cells. And
Uh-huh.
the really interesting thing is that immune fortification that lasted a month after they left the
Yeah.
forest.
Yeah.
And so, and it's phytoncides are really interesting because even if you just have a sort of diffuser of phytoncides, in the bedroom, it's shown
Yeah.
to help with the immune system.
Wow.
Even in just like petri dishes, when they look at its effect on cells, they can actually see the beneficial effects it's having on your natural killer cells. So,
Wow.
we think of spending time in a forest, in a green space. We think of it having like a strong psychological benefit, and it does. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. But there are really powerful physiological processes happening as well.
Yeah.
Another one to mention as well is what it does to our brain waves. So we know now that when you spend time in a green space, your brain actually shifts from these very busy and anxious beta waves to much more calming and restorative alpha waves and theta waves. And the theta waves are interesting because they're also the type of brain waves that's associated with meditating.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and we think that the reason that happens is because nature is basically full of what psychologists call soft fascinations. So these are things that basically hold your attention in a very effortless way. So if you
Mm.
think about like the rustling of leaves or the lapping of waves when you're on a beach, there's a reason that you can just stare at that and
Yeah.
effortlessly lose yourself in it,
Yeah.
compared to the opposite, which is what psychologists call hard fascinations. So things like your phone or an LED billboard or train announcements or emails, bosses, all of that sort of stuff. Um, and I think it's I mean, one of the really important reasons as well, I think, that people need a lot more rest is because, as well as all these cognitive benefits that people get, I talk a little bit in the book about why we're so desperately in need of this science now.
Yeah.
And just to mention a few statistics for your listeners. So globally, we now know that overwork leads to 745,000 deaths a year,
I
and that
know.
that in itself is a 20%, 29% increase since the year 2000.
Wow.
3 in 5 employees now report a lack of interest, motivation, and energy. That's a 38% increase since 2019. So even though it's true to say that working conditions are better today than they were in the past, I think
Yeah.
that's undeniable. When you
Yeah.
actually look at the data, we are in a dramatic regression in terms of burnout and overwork. There's
Yeah.
a reason why we keep hearing about burnout and overwork in the media. It's not it's not like a moral panic or people just wanting to go
Oh,
back to
it's real.
COVID and working at home. It's this is real and really important. And
Yeah.
it's and when I was the more I was digging into this science, the more sort of like, well, extraordinary but also quite alarming a lot of the science is. So there are some really interesting studies going on right now in Sweden and other Scandinavian countries, where they've basically looked at the effect of overwork on the brain
Mm.
over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So, uh, so what they've done is they've basically taken lots of people, who are overworked or maybe not overworked at different stages of work, and
Yeah.
they perform all these cognitive tests on their attention, their memory, their decision-making abilities, all these things, and they've assessed them over years, and they've now
Yeah.
found that once the symptoms of overwork set in, it takes the brain up to 3 years to recover. So it
Wow.
takes your brain 3 years to go back to your baseline ability to to solve a lot of these problems. So
Mm.
we are all, I it worries me, but I think we're all basically somewhere along that 3 year stretch, and so it's more important now more than ever to get us back to a proper balance of work and rest, where we actually realize that rest is the thing that's leading to sustained productivity, and that
Yeah.
actually all of the things we achieve in our life, are not despite our inactivity, but because of it. That's essentially what
Yeah.
this science is showing us. Rest is
Yeah.
the driving force of your best work and your greatest thoughts, essentially.
Absolutely.
It's not something that's in opposition to it. It's not something that you do after you've done the work and you can go and chill out and relax.
Uh-huh.
That's the driving force. Work and the results and the things you want to achieve are the end result of that um, initial ability to make rest sacrosanct.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's fantastic hearing you talk like this. And like you, I worry too. It's, there's such a culture, and I hear people's challenges of like, how can I do that? And will I not be thought of as lazy? And it's a real conditioning. I mean, after reading your book, which I devoured, in about a week, just reading it every night, I'm just loving it. And it reminded me to go back, to go be out more in nature. I mean, I love nature, but it's funny how that can all that nice rest and nature stuff can get chipped away first out of everything
Mm.
priority. And I sat watching. I'm out in Spain at the moment, and they have these beautiful swallows that do this whole nighttime routine. It's called murmuring or something,
Mm.
and and there's swarms of them in the sky, and I just sat, and it's now my nightly ritual is I'll go out and I'll just sit, it's about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and for about an hour, and it's mesmerizing just to watch them do
Mm.
their swarms, and then they do all these swarms, dive into the tops of trees, and they do wee thing there, and then they fly up again, and then they dive down, and it's so beautiful, the sound and the like you say, that
Mm.
element to our brain that's like picking up this, just the wow, look at them all, move together, and even though they're little things, they're all doing this thing that's built into their DNA or whatever to do every day, and just the sound once you get into the trees. And I could just literally feel the weight off my chest. I had some things that were sort, so it was so lovely to have kind of, that whole forest bathing, getting back into nature, even just, what plants and things are giving off, just nature by its very
Mm.
nature. It is so relaxing. And you're right, there's just so many people now sucked in because the work culture is, be the last, be the first in the morning, be the last to leave. And you don't take a lunch, stay at your desk, eat your lunch. And of course, the irony is, because I'd thought about approaching, from an emotional health perspective, approaching companies and say, from the mental health and the physical health and the output, people being off sick could be so improved if you could just even bring in like a mandatory they have an 1 hour lunch break. Make like my daughter's a teacher. We literally have to get her to fight to get her 30
Mm.
minutes break. Put a sign on her door without being disturbed. So there's a real, as you say, a lot more information. It's fantastic the science is now there, because then you can say to bosses, you want more money? This is how you're going to get more money.
Mm.
You're going to have less sick, you're going to get more output, but you need to, probably like the Googles and places like that, that they have all these kind of pods, resting stations and things, don't they, to help people. They understand, to get more out of their employees, they need to kind of, you know,
Mm.
I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a British or American thing, but it's really kind of cracking the whip, isn't it? People just want more and more and more, but actually they're getting less and less, as you're saying.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, such good points. I mean, it's yeah, I think in terms of the productivity, so many studies now show that if the harder you work your employees, the more it's going to hurt your bottom line as a company. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just undeniable now. And it's not surprising. I mean, we're not, our brains are not just computers that you can plug in and just leave running all day.
yeah,
We're human beings, and
yeah.
we need rest. And so, I mean, when you look at things like the huge trial they did in Iceland of the 4-day work week, they
Yes.
found that productivity actually, at worst, it stayed the same, but
Ah,
actually, in many cases, it also actually got better.
amazing.
And now, as a result of that, of the success of that trial, I think that they're trialing the 4-day work week in parts of Japan, I believe, and a few other countries. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but more and more organizations and governments and scientists are looking at the 4-day work week, which I think, if I had a magic wand, I would put us all
Everybody
on.
should.
I would put us all on the 4-day work week straight
But
away.
but I think it goes down to the caring, doesn't it? Like, you have to have people at the top. You've got people at the top are always worried about the shareholders, and the shareholders, perhaps,
Mm,
I'm generalizing here, but you got to have people that really care about the human. As you eloquently said,
yeah,
we're not, a computer or a piece of machinery that you can get more out of, and even they have their limitations. Even they would break down if you push them too hard.
yeah,
Think you've got to have that real curiosity and caring, and have a core element to the people. Um,
mm,
because I think when people do care and they know they're taken care of, then they will actually produce more, and they'll do so happily. Whilst the employer, there's very few companies you hear that really care about their employees. But
yeah. But that's the
'cause-
thing, because like but I even think this is probably the slightly more cynical side of me, but I even think those sorts of companies and the people with that very outmoded idea that we can just work our workers harder and harder and harder.
yeah,
It's not even that we need to change that mentality.
no,
You can leverage their selfishness by saying, okay, if you want more profits, you want more from your company. Here's the science showing that actually, if you allow your workers time to rest, if
yeah,
you adopt the 4-day work week, if you adopt all of these different rest policies, actually, you're you know
you'll
it
get
feel
what you want.
you'll get what you want exactly.
Yeah,
So, and I mean, one of my favorite studies in the book was the one where I interviewed Victoria Garfield at University College London, and where they did a really interesting study showing that napping, for instance, is way more important than we ever thought it was. So they
yeah,
found that people who take a daily 30-minute nap literally have bigger brains than those who don't.
yeah,
And the extraordinary thing about it is that the difference wasn't nothing. Like it was 15 cubic centimeters, which to put that into context, it's the volume of a small plum. So,
wow,
think
yeah,
about, the millions of brain cells and synapses and axons and connections and cognitive
yeah,
ability that is contained in the volume of a small plum. I mean, it's enormous.
yeah.
Um, and so, many other cultures, as you were saying earlier, they sort of intuitively know this because they have things
Ah,
like siestas, and they take their afternoon naps and relaxation more seriously, but we still think of it as a luxury. But again, that's a prime example. Give your workers time in the day if they want to have
mm,
a 30-minute nap.
yeah,
You'll have workers with literally bigger brains who are able to solve the problems that you've hired them to solve, like, far more effectively.
yeah,
So there's I think it's we don't even necessarily need to change some of the mindsets of people that are just purely driven by
Exactly.
profit. You can leverage their selfishness with the science. Uh,
Completely. And it's that paradigm shift to kind of go, you want output, you want more money, we can give you even more, but you can do it
exactly.
in a slightly different way. And actually it saves you on sick benefit and people being off ill and HR and all these
Yeah.
other, costs that you
Yeah.
have.
Well, and the staff turnover. I mean, the staff turnover rates are really horrendous now because of the working culture that many companies have. Like the toxic atmosphere of bullying in the workplace, that's really gone up.
Yeah,
Um, and this all cascades down towards our ability to, it all cascades down in the way that it affects things like, our planning, our organizational skills, our ability to manage, to communicate, to work as a team, all of these like critical higher faculties
yeah,
that our brains really need, not just for work, but just to live and be a human in the world.
absolutely.
Those things are hugely affected by all of the negative aspects of overwork.
Yeah.
So it's that, there's no gain to, as you say, like cracking the whip. So but yeah.
Yeah, and then like what happened with yourself, observing your own mom and your own dad, and and our children then mirror what they see, and then
Mm.
they I know my own children. I was kind of like, don't do as I've done, okay? I ended up bedridden for 2 years because I just worked myself to a ridiculous
Oh
degree, and then
gosh.
I had to kind of pretty much rebuild myself and had to do
Mm.
so in a way that like we are not going back down that path again, and really sit back and question, like what you're doing, this whole kind of afternoon nap thing, which is one of the my 3 daily basics that I recommend to people that I work with.
Mm.
Having a power shake in the morning, lots of protein, multivitamins and minerals and
Oh,
macrogreens.
great.
Journaling first thing in the morning as you wake up,
Oh, that's really good.
just so
Yeah.
good for the brain, and access to different parts you wouldn't normally get to. And then an afternoon nap, meditation, relaxation, 30 minutes minimum. And it's just so
Mm.
transformative. But again, we're you're I feel is just as cynical as yourself. Unfortunately, it takes a lot more just getting, but these things are, it's getting this information out, which is why I wanted you on to share about your book. Because I think if people can read it and then read the science behind it and then read the studies and then just even experiment, because I know that journaling in the morning is like a non-negotiable for me when people are working with me, because I'm like, you'll get to know you and what you think and feel in a whole new way. And then if you're doing your afternoon nap as well, you'll get the answers to all the questions that you have, whether it's in your
Mm.
body or in your life. And of course, it's whether or not people want to hear those things, and that's fine too. But when people are, reading books like yours, which is kind of like putting in the like, that's why I got so excited. I was just like, oh, you've got all the science and the data and studies, because this is intuitively what I knew I needed, the path I needed to go on. And I don't know about yourself, how easy do you find it in this day and age to rest and play and things? Well,
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm definitely a lot better than I was, but it's still very much a work in progress. I
yeah.
think I said it. I think I said it like in my acknowledgements at the end of the book. Like, there's a bit of a paradox, obviously, with um, writing a book like this, because writing a book's really hard work. But obviously,
Yes.
along the way, I was very much practicing what I preach,
Yeah.
and trying all of the different rest tools and different different types of rest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I think it even led to like a hilarious sort of tongue in cheek sketch in Private Eye of where what have they done? They had drawn like two people on a sofa, and two people on a sofa like relaxing, and they're sort of, but they look all a bit sort of like bedraggled, and they look like, and not like not a bit sort of down and under, and then like
Yeah.
one of them turns to the other one, is just like, oh, well, who knows where we would have been if you'd written that book. And then it's got the title of my book underneath it, which is really funny. But
Fantastic.
it's but yeah, because it does it, and there is a sort of an irony, a sort of paradox to me, to writing this book, but because it is hard work. And the thing is, as I want to, as I said in the book, I'm not anti-ambition or anti-hard work. I'm a
Oh.
very hard-working person, but I
Ah.
definitely was taking it too far for a long period of time. But the thing is, what I want to encourage people to do is, be ambitious, work hard, but it just needs to be done in a far more balanced way. And
Yeah.
and I suppose the more important thing is to say that it needs to be done by incorporating a lot more rest than
Complete.
what the people have been led to believe. We
Yeah.
again, everyone I speak to still thinks of it as a luxury, as something separate from their work, that not the driving force to their work. And so now I do find it hard some days, obviously, because some days
Sure.
I'm very much the sort of person where I just want to sort of hunker down with a task and
Mm,
spend long periods of time doing it. But
yeah.
even now, I can feel myself, getting that cognitive fatigue, and I think, okay, no, I need some default network activity now. So
Nice.
I leave my desk, I go for a walk in the park. Um, I break up my day much more now by time spent sort of just gazing out of the window, mind wandering, just letting my thoughts drift. And,
Yeah.
as you said, when you do that, then the idea pops into your head. Or you come
Yeah.
back to your desk, you feel so much more refreshed and able to take on the task that you were struggling with. Um, and
I
so,
love what you said there about it's default network time. I think that's really good. That gets the kind of, the people that are like, I've got to do something, and then default network time
well,
rather than
exactly,
rest.
yeah. And there, because the thing is as well, there, as well as like the default, as well as activating your default network by having intentional rest. So me
Yeah.
deciding, at some point in the day, I am going to go for a 20-minute walk in nature, which,
Yeah.
by the way, 20 minutes is actually what the largest study looking into this recommends in terms of green space a day. 20 minutes a day
Amazing. Yeah.
minimum. But so there's that, there's that intentional rest to activate your default network. But there are also times in the day where it's naturally very active that we
Yeah.
really need to take advantage of. So you mentioned, this is why I said I really love that you recommend to people to do some journaling in the morning,
Yeah.
because
Even before they go to the toilet and have a cup of coffee, literally as soon as they wake,
yeah,
pen and paper, and it's just insane what comes down. It's just like
yeah. Well,
download.
yeah. I mean, it's wonderful because it's there. So there's the time just before. There's a period called the hypnagogic phase, which is a phase for the brain just before wakefulness and sleep.
Yeah.
And we all sort of we often know when we're in the hypnagogic phase. I mean, I certainly do, when because your mind is quite sort of buzzing with activity, and you sort of I mean, I don't know about you, but I start. I mean, when I'm in the hypnagogic phase, if I'm lying in bed, I'll like look at like some clothes on a chair, and then my brain will start doing that thing, the perceptual grouping, where the clothes will form like a figure or something, and that's your
Yes. Yeah.
brain. That's your brain becoming like more imaginative. And the reason it's doing that is because the hypnagogic phase is a time of really strong default network activity. But
Mm,
interestingly, that phase in the morning, when you've just woken up but you haven't really started your day, and you're sort of in that period just between sleep and wakefulness, that's the hypnopompic phase. And the
right.
hypnopompic phase is another phase of really strong default network activity. So that's why
Ah.
it's really great to tell people, okay, jot down your thoughts. Like, what are you thinking? Don't just jump on your phone and switch off
No,
your
no,
your
no.
your imaginative brain, your
Yeah.
thinking self-generated thoughts brain. Actually, get just get some paper out and just jot down what you're thinking, because you'll have your most creative, insightful thoughts during those periods. um
Amazing.
so there are periods throughout the day, but I mean, I really recommend as well, like having far more breaks throughout the day. So I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro technique, for instance, where you take a 5-minute break every 25 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think it's yeah, it's people. I think that's a really good point. As long as people can start to realize, this is default network activity time,
Yeah. It's
then I
almost like
think it will help sink in.
I kind of use it with my children. Like, well, when you're for coming back to the phone, you can't use your phone when the battery's dead. Okay. And it's like your brain
Mm.
only has so much energy of output to it. So I'm like you. I mean, I can maybe last about sort of 40 minutes if I'm on task, and then I literally will force myself away, close the laptop, and like, get up, Wendy. I don't use the term, I'm going to use it now, default network time. It's time to go and refresh your brain, because you can feel it. You can feel when you're pushing, and there's just this kind of conflict and resistance, and you're not getting out of your brain what you want. But actually, you can get up, go away. It's interesting you saying that
Mm.
20-minute mark. But yeah, it's amazing that in the morning the journaling is just it's been a godsend to me, because
Mm.
people wake up with anxiety or stress or whatever, and they've not even gone into their day, and their the nervous system, their cortisol levels are up to all sorts of levels, but you get that onto paper. And I'd read Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. So it's interesting you talk about creativity.
Mm.
And her recommendation was three A5 pages, but I recommend three A4 pages that you just keep writing and writing and writing. So you got to the end of
Mm.
the third. Normally, at the end of the third page, something genius pops up that you're like, oh, where did that come from? And and it can just be an answer, or it can just be something that pops up that you just had no awareness to. And that's where I think journaling, meditation. So this whole kind of afternoon nap thing is so genius. And I think just you know um trying to keep ourselves awake and aware to
Mm.
bodies, our body speaks to us a lot.
Yeah.
Well, or through our the brain body connection down the vagus nerve, it's constantly speaking to us. And
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Because what exactly I was thinking as well about it's it's so true what you were saying about the, the metaphor about the phone iron dying and the phone dying of batteries, and how like we need to be much more conscious about the energy needs of our brain, because
yeah,
the brain is such an energetically active organ. It uses about like the most conservative estimate is that it uses 20% of our body's energy, and it's
yeah,
only 2% of our body's mass.
yeah,
So when you think about that, it uses an extraordinary amount of our energy. And
yeah,
so another thing worth mentioning, actually, to get really good default network activity is something as simple as just staring into space. So lots of the studies, when you're looking at this, they found that just staring into space for a few minutes and letting your
mm.
mind wander is really good for the default network.
I
For
loved
the
when you
default
said
network.
about going on a bus, but not going anywhere in particular and just staring out the window. I thought that was so cool. Like,
Yeah, well, that was inspired by so there was this really fascinating French polymath called Henri Poincaré,
yeah,
and I talk about him quite a bit in the book because he was basically one of the first people to kind of discover the default network without actually discovering
no,
it.
yeah,
Um, and this was over 100 years ago, and he was basically this French polymath, and he would spend a lot of time working on like really like difficult intractable mathematical equations, and he would
yeah,
sit at his desk and he would just bang his head against his desk, and he wouldn't be able he wouldn't solve them. But then he realized that actually leaving the desk and going for hopping on a bus, or going for a walk along the beach or a walk in the woods,
yeah,
the answers to his mathematical equations, so not even just general insights, something really quite difficult, they would
yeah.
pop into his head. And he
Wow,
at the time he called it sudden illumination, and he presented it to
I like
loads
that
of
phrase.
yeah
I'm gonna magpie the phrase kind of downloads, which sounds weird and kind of wee bit woo woo.
yeah, it's the sudden illumination. Well, he presented these findings to loads of other scientists, psychologists, biologists, and they basically ignored him because at the time, as with anything, I mean, science is only ever as good as the techniques available at the time. And
Yeah,
a lot of his research was based on just sort of guesswork and self-reports. He didn't have the advanced brain scanners that we have today and all of that sort of stuff. So and people were still very wrapped up in like Freudian psychological explanations of the brain. So he was essentially kind of just ignored. But
uh-huh.
we now know that what he was talking about, which he wrote in his journal a lot about this as well, and there's some really wonderful quotes from his journals that I mentioned in the book. But what he was talking about was the default network.
Yeah,
His default network was busily solving the problem. I mean, even when so if you take mind wandering, for instance, even when you mind wander to the point where it hinders your ability to perform a task in front of you, so
yeah,
you've had your head in the clouds just a little bit too long,
yeah.
even then it still ramps up your creativity. It
Wow.
still actually improves your brain's ability to be more creative. um
Mm,
so it's we're only really just scratching the surface of the potential, I think, of intentional rest and really
yeah.
tapping into the default network. So it's
I,
yeah
I
it's,
wonder, I
yeah.
wonder if people would kind of fear, when they're listening to this, that, oh, it all sounds great, but then when would I know I've had enough? And when is enough enough? Now, it kind of leads me
Mm.
into now let me get this correct. What was it? The description experience sample that you did? Is
Mm.
that right?
Yeah, so yeah, descriptive experience sampling. It's
Yeah.
basically
So
that's yeah. Carry on. Sorry.
Sorry, no, I just kind of, the mind wandering, which again, I love that concept because it just gives you permission. You hear of some
Mm,
very creative people, later you're saying, I used to just sit and look out the classroom window and drift away and look at the clouds and stuff. And it's like that you giving permission to just mind wander
mm.
again. But I wondered about your descriptive experience thing because I wonder if that kind of because people might fear that, oh, can I just sit and do nothing and mind wander? And yes, it's like so good for your brain. And
Yeah.
you may want to have like you had like a beep with that experience, didn't you? You had a beeper or an alarm or something that went off at a certain time to kind of
Yeah. So
yourself
it's
what you were aware of. Is that right?
yeah, so that's so the DES study was really interesting. So basically descriptive experience sampling, it's just a tool that psychologists use, and the person who actually pioneered this technique was a really interesting psychologist in America called Russell Hurlburt. Um, and so I spent quite a bit of time with Russell and his team trying this technique called
Yeah,
descriptive experience sampling. All it is basically he gives you a beeper and he tells you just to go about your day as you
yeah.
would normally, and it's programmed to beep randomly during the day. And as soon as it beeps, you'll basically stop whatever you're doing and just write down
So
your
catch like a butterfly net.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Just
Yeah.
write down your thoughts and experiences at that moment. Now
Ah,
obviously there might be moments in the day where I don't know, you're on the toilet or something and you just so you can ignore those beeps basically.
yes.
But you don't have to do it with every single beep, but ideally like as many beeps as you can.
Yeah.
And the idea behind it is to basically study mind wandering outside of a laboratory, because the thing about mind wandering is it's obviously very hard to study, and it's very
Uh-huh.
hard to study in a laboratory setting because obviously as soon as you're in a laboratory setting, you do all
You
these
know it.
tasks, you're influencing it too much. And
Yeah.
so it's to basically capture people's thoughts kind of in the wild, so to speak. And so I
Yeah.
spent a few months with him and his team of psychologists basically doing DES, so
Mm,
writing down my thoughts at random points. And the extraordinary thing about it is that what it reveals is that not only do we spend 25 to 50% of our day mind wandering without us even realizing it,
yeah.
but when you actually learn to think actually think about what you're thinking and sort of explore your inner world, and
Yeah.
it's so enriching, and there
Yeah.
are these all of these you know all of these wonderful creative insights that you actually gain from spending more
Yeah.
time mind wandering. That's one of the key findings of the mind wandering field, that
Mm,
actually it's a really powerful way for us to be more creative, because we think what the brain is doing is that it's
yeah.
basically scanning and searching and putting things together that you wouldn't otherwise think of. Because a lot of the time when you mind wander, and even during dreams, things
Yeah.
happen in your mind that seem to sort of break the laws of physics, and you sort of ignore it. But that's your brain basically trying to make connections that your rational, logical brain would normally just not allow you to do. But
Yeah.
it's your brain literally trying to be more creative, testing things out. And so the really interesting about Russell's DES experiment is that he's getting so much data from so many different people about their experiences and their mind wandering experiences, and he's sort of creating this really huge sort of fascinating catalog of different mind wanderers. And he sort of some people he's noticed are much more visual in terms of what they mind wander and think about during the day. Other
Yeah.
people are like with me, for instance, I think he found that a lot of my random mind wandering was to do with words and letters and things, which makes sense because I'm a writer, and I
Yes.
spent that time when I was doing it writing the book. Um,
Yeah.
but it's just it's a very it's an interesting way of just thinking about mind wandering much more than we previously have. But the DES is essentially it's a tool that scientists are using now, like one among many, to just to
Which
study mind
again
wandering.
is lovely, isn't it? Because it really feeds back to the rest and being in the moment and increasing that awareness and awakeness. And I wondered as well,
Mm.
like when I read that in the book, and I was thinking maybe I just set a couple of alarms on my phone, so throughout the day,
Oh yeah.
just to kind of go. wakey, wakey, Wendy, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? It's like, is this really what you want to be doing right now? Or did you get distracted and sucked in? Because actually, it takes so much brain energy to keep on task, keep focused,
Mm,
shut out the distraction. It actually takes energy for all these things, doesn't it? So that's where I thought, well,
mm.
maybe, just putting a whole load of different alarms on at different times just to kind of make sure that I was awake and aware and doing what I needed to do. But
I think it's
did you
yeah,
enjoy that doing that? Did you get
I did. Yeah, yeah, I found that really enjoyable. And especially that's part of the reason why I at one point in the book, just as an experiment, I got on a bus just
yes.
going to with no destination because I thought, well, this is what Henri Poincaré was doing when he realized that when he discovered the sudden illumination, the resting brain. And I thought, okay, well, to sort of honor Henri Poincaré, I thought I'll get on the bus with Russell's beeper and and just see if anything, if any kind of creative insight pops up. um
Yeah.
and it's interesting, I think, because I think the beeps that went off during that part of the experiment were quite visual. I remember one of them, I talked about it in the book a little bit, where um I was there, the beep went off at the moment the beep went off. I think I was looking at the orange sign of a London taxi.
Yes.
But I was thinking about my family, and I was thinking about my mum in particular. And I remember
Mm,
it was almost like I could see an image of my mother, sort of like in front of the orange taxi light. So
yeah.
it was just the visual cortex in my brain was essentially projecting that image out into the world, and I was seeing my mum in my mind's eye. And I was thinking, okay, my parents are getting older, and I need to visit them more often. I need to spend more time with them. Um, but that kind of thinking as well. So that was that I was on a bus just letting my mind wander, not focusing on a task.
Mm,
And that's a kind of emotional regulation mode of thinking that
yeah.
again is really hampered if we're spending too long focusing on a task. And so
Yeah. And
it's
I
not.
wonder if that's where anxiety comes from. If we're so
Mm,
busy doing, I don't have enough time because we're not human, we're human beings. You're not human, we're not human doing.
mm,
Being in the moment, and that's really kind of what you were doing. It was just being in that moment. And I always
mm,
wonder, I always think, to me, anxiety is an emotion, I'm generalizing here, is kind of a part that needs more information and perhaps not being heard. You having, as you say, that emotional thought about your parents and them getting older, it feels very kind of like balanced and measured and comforting and soothing and
mm,
just because if you're constantly doing something and with your hands and with your eyes and with your focus, you don't get that emotional regulation of, these are, I call downloads or illuminations, just to kind of like, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? As
mm,
we're not in tribes anymore, we're all separated
mm.
from one another. So, that feels very philosophical contemplation, if you like.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And I think so it's not just, I mean, there's a reason that J.K. Rowling came up with Harry Potter while she was on a train to
Yes.
Edinburgh. There's
Yeah.
there's just staring out of the window. Um and it's you mentioned anxiety, and I think you've really hit upon something there with the fact that because I agree that I think one of the main reasons that we're seeing such a skyrocket in anxiety, especially among younger people, is
Yeah.
because we're spending too much time a
Yeah.
task on with the brain instead of task off, and
Thank
too
you.
much time on our phones and all of that kind of stuff. Because when you actually look at the phases of overwork, or even just the phases of people who spend too much time on their phones, for instance, it actually it goes in quite a it moves in a very sinister pattern. It starts from, so to do with overwork, for instance, it starts with this phase of dissatisfaction. So you sort
Mm.
of that you're working too hard, you're dissatisfied with your job, but that's a manageable feeling, so you just ignore it. That
Yeah.
then moves on to cynicism, where
Yeah.
you basically you just become very, you don't care about your work anymore. It's just something you've got to do, right? You just think, well, that's just the way things are. I've got to crack on with this.
I've got a mortgage to pay and I got this to do and I just
Exactly.
pick it
Yeah,
up type thing. Yeah.
exactly. But that cynicism then moves into a phase that many psychologists basically refer to as dehumanization, and that's
Mm.
a kind of emotional hardening
Mm.
where you really don't care that much about your work, and it's, you have a very bad negative relationship with it because you haven't been resting enough. And it's that phase that then leads on to symptoms of, I mean, you feel sort of like incompetent, you feel hopeless, and that's what leads on to feelings of dread,
Yeah.
depression, and then anxiety.
Yeah.
And you sort of wear those feelings of anxiety and dread and depression. You wear it like skin, like it's been there all along, and you
Yeah.
normalize it, right? You think it's totally, and a big part of the reason you normalize it is because to move away from that feeling is to then move into the realm of productivity guilt and overgeneralized guilt, and this feeling that, oh well, I almost should be feeling this way because you know that's how many people around me are feeling, that's how the culture and the society is feeling.
Yeah.
And so, that's I think that's one of the main reasons we're seeing such a rise in anxiety cases. And it's
Yeah.
you know it's sort of self-fulfilling and self-defeating at the same time, because people are working harder and harder than ever before.
Yeah.
um and because we have our smartphones and we're able to broadcast that, or around the world, everyone can see what everyone else is doing now. And
Yeah.
so there's just this screaming signal that we're all receiving, which is, you've got to hustle, you've got to work harder, that's the aspirational life goal and all this stuff. And that's just making our anxiety worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So it's,
And then that's where the
yeah.
body then kicks in, because the body, I view the body as the subconscious to some degree, because when we're
Mm,
not hearing, what we should be hearing, and that's where the journaling is so great, because you can see the same repeated patterns coming up time and time and time again.
mm,
And it's what I always say to people, remember that whatever's coming up, you don't need to act upon, you just need to increase your awareness on it, but that's where your body, whether it be your stomach or your throat or your jaw, or your
mm,
body's trying to communicate to you that something is just out of court. And I think there's also this tendency to, that, talk about mind wandering and going on buses and just being out in nature, that, nature is always changing and moving and growing, and we as humans should be evolving and changing and growing too, and that means
mm,
change. And I think we seek change and fear change in equal measure, whereas if we can just rest our brain and trust that the answers that work for us will come to us,
mm,
through the modalities of play and rest and journaling and napping and things like that. And then we come back into this balance where we don't feel sucked into left or right, or right or wrong, or you know what I mean? And
mm,
really just take a rest from social media, to be honest,
mm.
rest from, being really disciplined with what's the latest time. Like for me, it's like 5 o'clock at night is the last time I look at emails. I just will not look at emails at
That's good.
any time normally, and weekends normally, unless it's the odd occasion, no. I try to put these really firm, but to the parts of me that were like thrust and go and come on and do more, and the pusher, the perfectionist, and all the parts of me that we could just have a field day and then end me back in bed again. I've had to kind of, create parts of me that is kind of what I call a parent part. I kind of goes, no, Wendy, I think you've done a bit too much today. So let's just go and do some nature time, or, mind wandering or creativity. And I think that's what's beautiful about your book. There's so many great things. I thoroughly enjoyed it so much. But the creative realm is so undervalued as well,
Mm,
in our world. When you think of, that, I mean, your book is a creative endeavor, poetry, music, things that bring the
mm,
light and the love and the warmth to our lives. Otherwise, why are we all working? What are we all working for, and what are we all working towards if we're not,
mm.
as the old saying goes, stopping and smelling the roses every now and then,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's beautifully said and beautifully put. I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, as I said before, I think we can lay a lot of the blame on social media and smartphone use, and I mean, just the fact that comparison culture now is just so amplified now because of social media and our smartphones. I mean,
But
I
our,
now,
our identity, I mean, if you look at nature,
yeah,
there's no two pink flowers the same. They're all, everything's, I mean, you have, different things that are like roses, but there's so many different colors of roses. And you look at nature, and everything's unique, and it's got its own, we've even all got our own unique fingerprints, and none of you and I's
mm,
fingerprints are different. And you're right, we're all trying to be compared against each other, or try to conform into Stepford wives are on a conveyor belt. That's not who we are, our individuality. And I think that's where your book is beautiful, allowing your brain at rest to go, what do I think? What do I feel?
Mm.
And then
Was
how does that
yeah,
show up in the world in a way that, you know, because everyone's uniqueness, to some degree or other, is nice, is lovely. You see some, oh God, they're so talented. Their individuality, their uniqueness. Sometimes it's just a joy to see that creativity come through in a person, you know,
yeah.
whether it's a book or a song or a piece of artwork, you know?
Well, it's that's just got me thinking actually. About I should have mentioned this earlier. So it's so interesting because like what you're saying about the importance of the self and individuality.
Yeah.
So that we now know actually is really important for the default network as well. It's actually one of the main functions of the default network. So the default network now, this is quite recent science, we're starting to think that it not only is your resting brain network the thing that gives you all of these cognitive benefits and is the driver of creativity, but it is actually underlies your core sense of self. And
Yeah.
so one of the really interesting studies looking at this was, I remember I was talking to Professor Marcus Rakel about this, because there have been patients who have a form of epilepsy that strikes in a particular node of the default network. And
No.
when these attacks come, what happens to these patients is that they actually they self dissociate. They basically they forget that they are an individual self. They sort of they lose their sense of self
Yeah.
momentarily, and
Yeah.
then when the seizure passes, it comes back. And so now, what's really interesting, and because even psilocybin, the active
Mm,
ingredient in magic mushrooms, has been
yeah.
shown to have this effect on the default network, where it essentially scrambles the default network. And what that does is it's essentially, you lose your sense of self. And that's
Yeah.
part of, that's part of the reason that some people find it quite an interesting cognitive experience. But what psilocybin. So psilocybin is now being used as a tool to study the effects of the cognitive um, underlying mechanisms of selfhood and the default network. But basically, what it's indicating is that the default network, the resting brain network, is also what we need to have our own sense of self. So
Yeah.
when you're in the park resting, or in the woods, and or just staring out of the window,
Yeah.
you're not just creating all of these cognitive benefits, you're also restoring your brain's ability to be yourself, to actually function as an individual. I mean,
Mm,
at one point, Marcus, he has this beautiful metaphor um he thinks of the brain as like an orchestra, and the default network as the conductor, essentially. And that's
mm,
the conductor is basically is there leading the orchestra, through the highs and the lows, through all of your life experiences. And I put to him, I said, well, do you think now, with our hustle mentality and our overwork culture, that
yeah.
we're essentially killing the conductor? And
Yes.
and he looked at me sort of, quite sort of like lugubriously, and was like, yeah, I think sadly that's the case. He
Uh-huh.
said, it's he said it's particularly bad in America, and I mean, I think that's undeniable, especially compared to Europe. I think Europe and England, we do take rest, thankfully, a bit more seriously than the Americans do. But it's really interesting because it shows that overwork is not just hampering our ability to be creative and be more productive in the long run. It's hampering our ability to be ourselves. And I think, someone asked me a question at a talk recently about that, and they were saying, people are conforming so much more, and as you were saying earlier, there are all of these sort of silos and echo chambers of left and right, and
Yeah.
as a result of, like, being on our phones all the time. And
Yeah.
it's, I think in large part it's because we're not, you know self-generated thought is becoming almost an endangered species at this
I
point.
agree. I agree. And it's a really valid point. The more people distract themselves into an external, then they are opening themselves up to imprint through the mirror neurons and what
Mm.
themselves from that. That is their idea. They take on, which, in adolescence, it's part of adolescence, isn't it? Is trying to form
Mm.
who am I? That whole kind of conundrum, know thyself type thing. And that's what adolescence is the big bang, if you like, of who we are as humans, evolving and forming, and we take on things, and normally opposite of parents and some things, out of just rebellion. But who are we? And then as we go through our lives, I think am I right in saying the prefrontal cortex closes off to some degree at like age 26, 27, sort of taking in identity? Am I right there?
Well, I think so. Brain development, they think sort of starts to sort of taper off around the age of 25. So
Right.
up until 25, you've still got lots of like myelination happening and different types of like neurodevelopment happening. But then, but brain development really happens throughout life because
Well, I
you're
was going to say,
yeah.
because we're constantly reading, but I think you're right. I think if people are being fed all the same stuff, all this information and told the same stuff, and then it's being polarized, then people are being forced to take a left or right or one side or the other. When actually, I've always prided myself on trying to sit in the middle and see,
Mm,
and play with things in my mind. Even from primary school, I used to hate when people were like, I use the word hate deliberately, when people try and play people off against each other. And I'd always try and be that person to kind of go, well, let me hear what they're saying, let me hear what they're saying, and I'll arrive at my own decision. But I don't think
mm,
that's encouraged enough now. And people are being pumped, literally pumped. I mean, it is.
mm.
Anytime you go on your phone, I think I read that you're up against 26 engineers every time you pick up your phone and go onto
Oh, wow.
fighting 26 people's brain
Yeah.
to come off that thing. So I am not a huge fan of
Mm,
it. I think getting people to recognize their own identity, their unique fingerprint is such a gift. It's such a
mm,
joy when people are able to kind of lean into that and like, who am I? And not feel kind of there's something wrong with me because I think this and everyone on social media thinks that. I think there's not enough
mm,
encouragement of people to go, let's just hear everybody, and everybody's thoughts and feelings. We've got such
mm,
polarity now, and it is quite frightening, whereas people then clam up more and they think, well, I better not have that thought, I better not have that feeling because what does that say about me? And then goes right back to the default network of, I love
mm.
that analogy of the conductor. I think that's so
Yeah, no, yeah, I love that as well. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of the things that I just have like no time for, and I do worry that it's getting worse. Is basically what you were saying about like people being convinced. I mean,
uh,
I suppose it's basically a kind of dogmatic certainty.
yeah.
And I suppose like whether that dogmatic certainty is like a political dogmatic certainty or a religious
Yeah.
dogmatic certainty, like it's that's the thing that I worry that people are moving more towards, and it's because
I think it's
yeah,
always been there, but I think it's more
mm,
amplified now because it's in our faces. Like I
yeah,
remember like about 30, 40 years ago having a debate with someone in the pub many, many moons ago, and they were very staunch this party. And I was like, well, I don't necessarily agree with that party, but tell me more. No,
mm,
and he just didn't have, he was, you wanted to kind of knock his head and see if it was wood. You know, you just
yeah,
kind of like, well, let's have a discussion. Like, you don't have to.
yeah.
So I
It's
think it's
amazing
always been
how
there, but it's so dialed up now. And
yeah,
expert
it's
marketers who know, I mean, I can't be bothered with these like quarter of a second flashes in front of our eyes. And
mm,
so we literally have to pick it up like a with a kind of cross against it, going like, we just have to be very aware and awake. I think that's for myself and my children. I'm like, as long as you're journaling every morning and you're hearing what is being fed, maybe unconsciously or subconsciously that you're not even
mm,
aware of, and like, what do you really think at your core? What do you feel? What's coming up for you? And then, that we should be evolving.
yeah, exactly. And I think yeah, the more time people can spend, even being alone. I have a chapter in the book about solitude and the
Love it.
importance of that, and because
Yeah,
a lot's been written about the social brain, and we are social animals, obviously,
yeah.
but we don't. I do think people don't spend enough time just alone with their own thoughts.
Yeah.
So
People jump from relationship to relationship or always have
yeah,
to. I'm with you. I love solitude, sanctity,
yeah.
silence, and it just fills me up to then go and be social, but I couldn't
Yeah,
be.
exactly. Well, I mean, I for the book, I spent 10 days in a cabin in the woods with just
Yeah,
my thoughts, and it was really restorative. and
Yeah.
really rejuvenating. And they have like you can do that now quite easily. Like there are lots of like cabins and like tents and um like camps and things where they're deliberately designed for like time spent alone with your thoughts. I think some of them even like have a little drop box you can put your phone in and you can lock it away and it just be
Nice.
so that you're nowhere near your phone. I mean, or you can just like not take your phone with you. But
I mean, I remember the days where you didn't have one. Like you
well,
just went
yeah,
out.
yeah,
It was somebody joking the other day going, oh, like, oh, what do I do without my phone? It's like, well, for many, many centuries before,
yeah. Well,
people went
exactly, yeah.
out without a
Yeah.
phone and without a camera and without, sat nav
Yeah.
and
I mean, I've often thought about getting like what they now call a dumb phone, which is
yeah, I've
basically
got
like a
one. I've got a
Nokia.
flip. I've got a flip, an old
I
flip one.
I have you. I'm tempted. Does it? Yeah. Is it
It's
all right?
great because I've got my iPhone, but I've got a flip one too, which will just for my kids have my number and I can send a text, and that is it. Because I've got
Yeah.
where I don't have any notifications on my phone, don't have the ringer
Mm.
on, I don't turn it on until 1 p.m. most
Hmm.
after because it's an addiction. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
a,
And
a
like
book.
you only. I remember the days where every phone that people had was basically like a Nokia 3210, and I thought that was great. You could text on it, you could play Snake on it if you wanted to. I
Yeah,
loved that, and I
yeah,
like it really does. I do really like it. Really, I really resent the fact that so much stuff now is now dependent on the smartphone. But I'm
I
quite tempted to get just something like a Nokia for just day to day and
yeah.
leave the smartphone at home
Take
and
your
treat.
credit card, the old plastic thing that
Yeah.
have. Take a. I
Exactly.
was like doing that the other day. I'm like, take my Nokia and take my credit card, and that's all that I need. Like that. That's it.
Exactly. And then you can still use the smartphone, but use it like as a computer, which is
Exactly.
basically what it is at
Yeah.
certain times of the day. I mean,
When you
I'm
when
quite
you
good
think
now.
of overwork and things like what we're talking about at the very beginning,
Yeah.
if you've got your boss and everybody constantly at you all the
Yeah.
time, then it's exhausting.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things I talk about as well is this idea of leaving work at work, which we're
Yes.
not able to do anymore. We work into the evenings, we work on the weekends. We're always checking our emails, and so you're always seeing work emails. We're not able to unplug from it. So I mean, I now try to basically leave my phone in a certain room or in a kitchen drawer in the evening and just go and spend time with my family and just be like, I'm just not going to look at that now.
Yes.
But it's hard. It is hard. But
We have to put these boundaries in to protect our brain. It should be the brain boundaries that we call them, that we
yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
But look, I'm conscious. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a joy to chat with you. I mean, what would be your parting words to people? Obviously, I'll have details of your book written down below for people to get
Um,
details of.
Parting words. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I suppose that,
If we start where we end where we begin, and I'll get you to say your words, but like work is a crown, but rest is wisdom. I love that.
yeah, that was so it's what my grandmother said to my father many years ago, and I think really the take home message is that we need to take rest a lot more seriously than we do, because it is rest, not work, that is the real secret of sustained productivity. It's people, as I said, people succeed in life not despite their inactivity but because of it, because
Yeah,
it's rest and activating your brain's default network. That's literally what gives you your most creative insights, your ability to solve problems, your ability to be more productive in the long run. And
yeah,
so we need to move away from this hustle, overwork mentality. Not because I'm anti-ambition or anti-hard work, because I'm really not. I'm pro-ambition, I'm pro-hard work, I'm pro achieving all of the things that people want to achieve in their life that gives their
yeah.
lives meaning. But you're only going to get that if you take rest a lot more seriously. And so please, please, please spend more time resting without the guilt, because when you do, your brain is activating the default network. You're doing an awful lot of something when you think you're doing nothing, and so
Yeah,
your brain
and
will
I think
thank
and I
you.
think as you said, that like it gives life more meaning. And even if you're not finding the meaning or feeling the meaning, it's because you're not taking enough default networks time,
Mm,
or rest, or where you want to call it. You're not taking enough time to see it and feel it and hear it and sense it and touch it, because
mm,
there's, as you say, we're just all sucked into this hustle culture, which is just going to make you physically ill and depressed and down and cynical and all those different things. But thank you so much. It's just been an
uh,
utter joy to chat to you again, and
uh,
and I fully intend to read your other books. So I would love to get you back on again and talk about them because I think they're really important subjects as well.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Wendy. Yeah, amazing questions. It allowed me to like go off in lots of different directions, and really, really good questions. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, I really appreciate your interest, and thank you so much for the kind words as well about the book. It means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome, and I highly recommend everyone to rush out and get it. And even your audiobook is voiced by you too, so it's lovely to hear
Um,
your audiobook as well. But
Oh,
thank you so
thank you.
much, and congratulations on all your success. It's so well deserved.
Oh, thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Speak to you
Speak
soon.
soon. Bye.
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 Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Wasn't he just lovely and filled with so much exciting, details about the studies and the science and the neuroscience. So I hope that this has inspired you to know that, start with something small. So, if you don't do anything, you get up in the morning and then you're just flat out until you pass out in bed at night. Maybe just start to kind of, if you're at work, that lunch hour that you're sort of supposed to have by health and safety standards and union rules or whatever is part of your contract, try and even just take 30 minutes. Try and just start small. Of course, journal in the morning if you can because it's so powerful. But equally, as I say, after, try and get your lunch. Try and get that 30 minutes of lunch. Try and take, if you can, even go to your car and nap in your car. I've even seen people go to the toilet cubicles and just sit and take 50 minutes and close their eyes and put a meditation relaxation on. Just start small on this journey of resting your brain because it literally, as the book title says, why doing nothing can literally change your life. And it's really challenging because everything in our culture says to be on all the time. I would also encourage you, try and not pick up your phone in the evening. Try and pick up a book instead. Try and just go and sit in nature. As I mentioned in the interview, I try now to go out and watch the birds with their evening rituals and their murmuring and just, sucking in and be in awe of nature because that can help our brain waves and also indeed help our immune system. So start small, give yourself lots of little wins, but get out and buy the book. It's so joyful, and I really hope it inspires you to take great care of yourself and allow you to tune into yourself even more. And of course, it's available on all platforms, Amazon, all good bookstores, and I do hope that you enjoy it. So, until next time, trust your soul, follow your heart, and let your instincts play their part.